Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host. Still here in Pittston, but that's okay. Got a good night's sleep. Gonna go pick up a load later today. I'm also gonna meet up with my wife before that. I don't know, have a little dinner or something. Anyway, so today's October 1st. It's the beginning of the fourth quarter, if you're into those quarter things. And I wanted to talk about a couple of things as we head towards the end of the year, and it's going to go by fast. But a couple of anniversaries, important anniversaries, I think, today. First of all, today is President Jimmy Carter's 97th birthday. 97 years old. Happy birthday to President Carter. He lives down in Plains, Georgia. Just living the good life. And by the way, President Carter's the only he's the only graduate of the Naval Academy to ever be president. So I got my Naval Academy hoodie on. This hoodie is actually, I've had this hoodie longer than, I had this hoodie before 3 of my kids were born. That's how long I've had it. Because I went to the Naval Academy on the staff there in 1997, and I probably got this hoodie in 98. So it's a little worn out, but it's really heavy, and yeah, I'm never giving it up. So, and another important anniversary, and this is important for a lot of people. 50 years ago today, Walt Disney World opened in Florida. And just to give you an idea of the impact of that, so Disneyland in California had opened in 1955. So it'd been around for a little while, but Disney World in Florida just kind of changed the landscape, no pun intended, of theme parks. Like all the other major theme parks that you can think of in the United States, whether it's the Six Flags brand or Busch Gardens or like King's Dominion, Kings Island, all those well-known theme parks all opened after Walt Disney World. Now, like, I think King's Dominion and Busch Gardens both opened in 1975. So, you know, the idea that you could create this attraction, it was, you know, Disney's idea. And of course, then they added Epcot, then they added Animal Kingdom, then they added Hollywood Studios, then they added the water park, and you know, Disney Main Street and all this other stuff, and the resorts, and it's crazy now, crazy. But yeah, it's a big deal. It's huge, and it's still one of the top tourist destinations in the world. So anyway, I think that's kind of cool, and people either hate like going to Disney or love it. I'm in the latter category. Haven't been in a few years, but I enjoy it. So that's that. So a couple of things I wanted to talk about today. I've been working real hard to try to improve my fuel economy, but really my cost per mile for fuel. And so my truck has consistently gotten, like, I average 9.6 miles per gallon. That's what I average over basically since I've had this truck. And that I can keep track of on the dash. But there's also an area in the My Prime section of your Prime app, and if you go down to like My Fleet, even if you're leasing and you only have one truck, you can see what your fuel economy is. And I'm gonna just show you my progression. It gives you an 8-week, 4-week, and then like a current. So I'm going to show you that my 8-week, my 4-week, and my current fuel, and you'll be able to see how I'm improving and why that's important. So take a look at those numbers, and these are just screenshots straight from the app on the My Prime side. So that's one of the things that I always look at, and I just want to be consistent, and if you look at the numbers, right, like there's still, even at like just a hair above 10 cents per mile, there's still a lot of people doing better than I am. So even my fleet manager like has 15 people that are doing better than I am, and then if you look at like reefer, there's like hundreds of people doing better than I am. So props to those people, but I know from having not done this well, when I would see the other numbers, there are thousands of people out there that are not doing as well. Now, that may be a trade-off that they want to make, and that, you know, helps me segue into what I really wanted to talk about today. And, you know, every once in a while there'll be somebody that comes up and they're like, oh, you know, all these people at, you know, Prime are unsuccessful in their leases. How, you know, what is the percentage of people that quit their leases and fail to complete their leases, etc.? And truthfully, I don't know the answer to that. But here's why, but let me just discuss this for a minute. So the notion that just because somebody doesn't complete a lease, it's a negative, is kind of misguided. And it also adds to, creates a narrative that's not useful. And here's why I say that. I know people who did not complete their lease at Prime, and so they basically walked away from their lease. But they didn't walk away from their lease because they weren't successful at it. They walked away to do something better, or, you know, better for them, like buy a truck. So for instance, I think I've said this before, the lease I have is 100 weeks, exactly 100 weeks, so just short of 2 years. I don't know why the person who had this truck before me didn't complete the lease. It may have been that they ordered a truck, and then when it came in, they were just like, okay, I'm done with this truck, I got my new truck, and now they're paying off, you know, a new truck, and in 3 years they'll be done with that and own their truck, and maybe that was their goal all along. So it doesn't mean them walking away from this lease was a failure for them. They had this lease for 56 weeks. I mean, I'm guessing that for 56 weeks they were doing what they needed to do. Another reason somebody might walk away from a lease is because they just get a better job offer somewhere else. Like, I'm not saying that I would walk away from a lease to make, you know, I don't know, an extra $3,000 a year. But maybe maybe somebody said, hey, you know, you're making this over at Prime, but if you come over here and drive one of my trucks, here's what you can do. Well, then walking away from the lease makes sense. Maybe it's a job they wanted all along. Or maybe they were driving a truck until they got into medical school. I don't know. You know, there's all sorts of reasons for walking away from a lease. And the other thing that's also true is that when you start looking at numbers, a lot of times those numbers are skewed. Like we've probably all heard the figure that like 50% of marriages in the United States end in divorce. Well, that number's true, but you know what also is true? That a lot of times those divorces are people that have been divorced before. I mean, we've all met people who are on like spouse number 4, okay? So I've never been divorced. I've been married to one person for over 29 years. Never was married. I wasn't married before that. And so I'm like, I account for 0 divorces. My wife and I account for 0 divorces in America. But we know people that are on their 3rd spouse or their 4th spouse, right? So one person can have, and the other thing too is if you have somebody that's been married 4 times, and let's say the person they are married to is on their 4th marriage, that's 2 people with 3 divorces, right? So they account for a lot of divorces. So what I'm saying is when you look at the numbers and and by the way, a lot of people on social media, they say stuff and they can't back it up with facts. So anyways, now that we kind of got that out of the way, the idea about the numbers, let's just talk about what I think can make you successful as a lease operator at Prime. And this goes for owner operators too. The first thing, the secret, and I've said this before, and people have mentioned it, but the secret to being a successful truck driver is to drive a truck. What do I mean by that? Successful truck drivers are not taking 4 2-week vacations a year. Well, they might be if they own a truck and they're just rolling in it when they are driving. But the bottom line is when you start out in this business, the vast majority of your time needs to be with the wheels turning. The driver's door needs to be closed and you need to be going down the highway and making money. And a lot of people will say, oh, well, the rates aren't high or the rates aren't this or that. You know what? The rate for somebody who's sitting still is not ever going to be higher than the rate for somebody going down the road, right? Because the rate you get for sitting still is 0. Unless you can find some shipper that's like, hey, look, I will pay you $1,000 to just put my stuff in your trailer and sit still for a week. That's not a thing, right? You have to get loads and you have to get down the road. You have to use your time wisely. Anybody that's unsuccessful here, and well, let me back up. There are going to be weeks where you don't do that well, where maybe you have a low week. The truck netted $100, okay, or the truck was negative, right? Like you didn't even make enough money to cover your fixed costs and what you spent on fuel that week. That's possible. But that's 1 week, right? That's 1 week. I mean, and if you're not like emotionally mature enough and you don't have enough like stick-to-itiveness, if that's a thing, enough ambition to say, okay, I did poorly that week, let's figure out why and not do that again if we can avoid it. But people who are like, they have a couple of bad weeks and they get in the hole and then they're like, oh, screw it, this just doesn't work, this is a scam, I can't make this work. They're just charging me for this truck week after week after week, and how am I supposed to make any money? I gotta live. Well, if you're that person, then being a business owner is not for you. you're not cut out for being a business owner in any industry, because that's the vagaries of the market are going to give you ups and downs all the time. Some weeks you might, like I ran a law firm. I mean, some weeks we would have $500,000 come in, and then other weeks nothing, but we still had to pay our bills, right? We still had to pay rent, or we still had to make payroll, so I'm like, oh, if I looked at it in isolation and I said, oh well, damn, I paid all these employees, I got, like, I don't know what it was, let's say it was $70,000 per payday, just throw a number out there, but my firm I only got checks for like $25,000 for the week from clients, and I'm like, well, what am I in business for? Let's just shut this thing down. Well, everybody who worked for me would have been like, what the hell's wrong with Terry? We made $500,000 last week or whatever. It's the same thing here, and a lot of times when there are people out there that are trying to like recruit for this business, they're like, oh man, I made $10,000 last week, and by the way, gross doesn't mean anything. I mean, gross is a great way to just gauge it against anybody, because then all the stuff I talked about, like how you drive, when you drive, your fuel economy, what you spend your money on, all that stuff comes into play. And so I know that if you're not prepared mentally, forget about financially, because you can always survive, right? Like you'll find a way to get a meal. But if you're not prepared mentally for the ups and downs, this can seem like a really depressing business at times. And so you'll be able to weather that storm if you're prepared for it financially and mentally. So the way to be successful here is to be prepared for the long haul, right? No pun intended, right? Your week-to-week settlements are not the gauge per se of success. You can't look at those in isolation. You got to look at, what are my averages? What am I doing wrong? Because I think that when you first start leasing at Prime, you're going to have some things happen that you didn't expect, even if you're well prepared. And so you have to be able to get past that, right? Work through it to start finding out what the sweet spot is. What are the runs that you like? What are, looking at the overall picture, take a trip that pays a little bit less to get to a trip that pays quite a bit more. Get a good relationship with your fleet manager. Be a can-do person. Be a person that gets stuff done. That's the key. That's the key to success. And let me say this: if Prime's program was so flawed and it was just designed to make you fail, then Prime would eventually go out of business. All right, and they wouldn't have as many drivers as they do, because for every person that's unsuccessful at Prime, there's probably 10 people or 9 other people that are successful, which would say, okay, the failure rate is 10%. But even if there's a failure rate of 10% or 20% or 30%, that doesn't mean that's Prime's fault, because the system is there. I mean, do you know how many people don't make it through their first 5 years in the NFL, but yet everybody likes to watch the NFL on Sundays or Thursdays, or I don't know, all the days they play, Mondays. We all watch it, but if you think about it from an individual perspective, we're watching a bunch of people that are destined for failure. The Tom Brady's of the world are a rarity, right? Guys who stay in the league forever and make a gazillion dollars. But a lot of people don't even last a year in the NFL. I saw a statistic yesterday, because I was reading about the minor league baseball system, 82% of the people that play professional baseball never make it to the majors. So, like, there's a lot of people playing baseball for some kind of money. They're professional baseball players. And, 18% of them are going to maybe play in the majors one game. And that's the standard too, right? If you play in one game in the majors, then you're part of that 18%. The percentage that actually have like a really super career in the majors is probably more like, I don't know, 8 or 9% of those guys. So all I'm saying is that if you're thinking about leasing at Prime, or maybe leasing at any company, it's not the lottery. And even when it is the lottery, I also feel like there's a bunch of people that they come here and they left a job where they were making $14.50 an hour. And they come to Prime. And Prime is like this huge opportunity. And maybe they get through PSD, they get through TNT. They're making $900 a week in TNT now. That's more than a lot of people have ever made, and that's just as a trainee. So then, right? Then they go in and they get a truck and they get their first load, and it says you can do something with this truck in 2 days that's going to pay you $3,000. And like, they turn into that emoji with the dollar signs on the eyes. Well, what that doesn't say is that, okay, during that time that you're making $3,000, you're spending $2,500 because you got the truck fixed costs, you got fuel taxes, you got fuel costs, you got tolls, you got this, you got that. It's not magic, right? It's not magic. I think it was Ashton Kutcher gave a speech years ago to like the youth TV. I can't even remember what it was. It's on YouTube, and he basically said, being famous looks a lot like hard work. I think that I'm maybe paraphrasing him, but he basically said, if you want to get good at something, you're probably going to have to work hard at it. And that's the secret here. This is an easy job, like other people have said on YouTube. It is an easy job. Some days, man, it's great. It's like the sun's out, the weather's great, there's no snow on the road. I'm just going to drive a 18,000 pound load and enjoy the scenery and drive across America. That's an easy job. But then the weather's going to change and the fuel prices are going to go up and the terrain's going to get harder to handle and there's going to be more traffic. And then I'm going to have a receiver that makes me wait for 18 hours. Then I'm going to, then I got a deadhead to another load that doesn't pay as much as the one I was on. And now at the end of the week, I'm like, oh, I only made this, $500. What did I do this for? And the answer is because you're in it for the long haul. So when you see somebody that says they failed at Prime, take that with a grain of salt. Because there are way more people here at Prime and probably in leasing in general that are successful. Although I will tell you there are some horrible deals out there because I see them. I read the advertisements. I'm like, I do the math. But I think there are a lot more people here that are successful than fail. Okay? And, your success or failure is not going to be because of the program that's here or the system that's here. If you utilize the system to your benefit, if you figure out what the game is, and you figure out the best way to exploit what you're being given, then you will be successful. And you will get to where you want to be. You will meet your goals, whatever they might be. And if you happen to come upon something much better, then you have a walk-away lease. You don't, that's the other beauty of it. I actually believe that the walk-away lease is a great thing, but it makes it too easy to quit. It makes it too easy to be unsuccessful because people are like, I can suck at this. I cannot work hard at this. And then when it gets really bad and I'm like $10,000 negative, I can just walk away. I mean, that's a gift that you've been given by Prime that actually makes it easier for you to quit. So I don't know. Maybe Prime is part of the problem there after all. Anyway, I just share all that stuff with you. Have a good day. Have a good weekend. Let's be safe out there. Oh, and by the way, tonight, big game, Iowa, Maryland. 2 schools I have strong affiliations with. And so we'll see who comes out on top. 2 4-0 teams. I think it's going to be Iowa. But I haven't watched Maryland that much this year, so we'll see. Anyway, talk to you soon. Be safe. Bye.